Mark's barn sat at the edge of the quiet suburban sprawl like an island of peace. Behind the chipped red paint and sturdy wooden beams lay his sanctuary, a place where the constant buzz of neighborhood politics and the overbearing HOA rules couldn't touch him. He'd built the barn years ago, using it as a workshop and a retreat from the nosy eyes and endless regulations that seemed to choke the streets beyond. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the field as Mark stepped out onto his porch, clutching a cold beer. The air smelled like fresh-cut hay and wildflowers. For once, the only sounds were the gentle rustling of the wind and the distant chirping of birds. Just as he was about to settle into his favorite rocking chair, the faint throb of bass music rippled through the air. Mark's brow furrowed. That wasn't coming from the neighborhood park or any nearby house. It was closer, much closer. He set his beer down, eyes narrowing as he scanned the tree line between his property and the suburban homes. Flickers of light bounced between the branches and muffled voices floated on the breeze. "No way," Mark muttered to himself. "Not my barn." His heartbeat quickened as he grabbed his flashlight and started toward the barn, each step crunching softly on the gravel driveway. His barn was more than just a building. It was his fortress against the petty control of the HOA's endless rules. He'd fought tooth and nail to keep it private, resisting pressure from the neighborhood's self-appointed watchdog Karen. Karen, the queen bee of the HOA, had a reputation, always meddling, always watching, always ready to flex her so-called authority. She dressed like she was running for mayor every day and had the sharp tongue to match. Mark had tried to stay out of her way, but she had a way of dragging everyone into her schemes. As he neared the barn, the music grew louder, the flashing colored lights from inside cut through the windows like a warning beacon. He could see silhouettes moving, dozens of people laughing and drinking, spilling into every corner of the space he carefully maintained. Karen, Mark spat under his breath, recognizing her unmistakable figure directing the chaos with a raised glass. Her smile was smug, like she owned the place, and tonight, it seemed she did. Mark's fists clenched at his sides. "This is my property. You have no right." But Karen cut him off, raising a hand, as if silencing an annoying fly. "Relax, Mark. It's just a little neighborhood party. We're all part of the community, aren't we?" Her voice dripped with condescension. "Besides, the HOA decided this barn was a community asset. You're just a homeowner like the rest of us." Mark's stomach tightened. He knew the HOA board had been looking for ways to assert more control, but this, seizing his barn without even asking, it felt like a betrayal from a neighborhood he'd once trusted. As he stood there, helpless to stop the invasion, a sudden movement caught his eye. A shadow slipped silently through the crowd, edging toward the back exit. Mark squinted, but couldn't make out the figure's face. Something about the person's hurried, secretive steps didn't sit right. Curiosity and suspicion ignited in Mark's mind. Was this just a wild party, or something more sinister lurking beneath the surface? The music pounded louder, and the barn doors flung open to welcome another wave of latecomers. Mark took a step back, anger boiling with frustration. This was no longer just a party. It was a takeover. And Mark knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let Karen and her HOA cronies make a mess of his life without a fight. The night air pulsed with music and laughter as Karen's crew poured into Mark's barn. What was supposed to be his private refuge had turned into a neon-lit madhouse, echoing with rowdy cheers and clinking bottles. Mark stood just outside the barn, jaw tight, watching his sanctuary unravel under the weight of loud, careless strangers. Karen, in her signature power stance, held court in the center of the chaos. Her sharp eyes scanned the crowd like a general surveying her troops, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. "Welcome to the new community hub," she declared, her voice cutting through the noise. Mark stepped forward, voice firm but low, trying to be heard over the blaring music. "Karen, this is my property. You had no permission to do this." Karen turned sharply, fixing him with a steely glare. "Oh, Mark, don't be so dramatic. The HOA voted last month to open this barn for neighborhood events. You must have missed the meeting." Mark's heart sank. He hadn't received any notice of such a vote, and a quick glance at the crowd showed many were nodding in agreement, or at least pretending to. That vote was never legitimate. You didn't have my consent or the majorities. A chorus of laughter and murmurs rose, but Karen waved it off like a pro. Details, details. The community needs a place to gather. Your barn is perfect. Mark clenched his fists, rage simmering beneath the surface. He stepped toward the barn door, intent on shutting the party down immediately. But as he moved, something in the crowd shifted. Eyes flickered toward a narrow side door, which a few guests casually slipped through, carrying crates of drinks and setting up more tables in the barn's dark corners. Mark noticed the back exit was left wide open, a glaring oversight. Before he could react, a rough shove from behind sent him stumbling into the gravel. "Calm down, Mark," a voice sneered in his ear. It was Tom, one of Karen's loyal HOA enforcers. "You're outnumbered. Just back off and let us enjoy ourselves." Mark straightened, his gaze locking with Tom's. This isn't over. He turned back toward the barn, only to catch a glimpse of that shadowy figure he'd seen earlier, slipping through the crowd again, this time heading to the barn's loft. Mark's suspicion deepened. Something was off. Inside, the party raged on. Music thumped so hard the walls seemed to vibrate. Glasses clinked, and laughter echoed under the exposed rafters. Karen was the center of attention, issuing commands with a queen's confidence, her voice rising above the noise. But even as the festivities grew louder, tension crackled beneath the surface. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances, whispering behind cupped hands. Mark caught snippets, rumors about the barn's past, whispered warnings about what lay beneath the floorboards. His mind raced. Years ago, when he built the barn, he'd discovered something odd buried deep in the ground. Something he'd buried himself, a secret he'd hoped no one would ever uncover. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the barn into near darkness for a heartbeat before the emergency bulbs buzzed on. Gasps and startled cries filled the air. Karen's smile faltered for a moment. Mark took advantage of the pause. "If you want to keep this party going," he called out, voice steady, "you'll listen carefully. This barn isn't just a party venue. It's private property, and I have the power to make sure you don't leave until you respect that." A hush fell over the crowd. Karen's eyes blazed. "You're bluffing." Mark shook his head, pulling his phone from his pocket. "No bluff. Wait and see." As the music faded, the once celebratory crowd grew restless and uneasy. The sense of celebration was replaced by creeping dread, as if the barn itself was closing in on them. Mark's stare hardened. Tonight, the battle for control wasn't just about a barn. It was about respect, boundaries, and a quiet man pushed too far. Back inside his house, Mark leaned against the kitchen counter, eyes locked on the screen of his laptop. The soft glow illuminated his tense face as the live feed from the barn's security cameras flickered in the dim room. Through the multiple angles, he watched Karen's party unfold, loud, careless, and utterly disrespectful. But Mark wasn't powerless. Not tonight. Years ago, when he built the barn, he had installed an advanced security system, not just cameras, but a remote lockdown feature. He'd kept it a secret, more out of precaution than necessity. Now, it felt like a quiet weapon waiting to be wielded. The screen showed Karen raising her glass, laughing with her cronies, oblivious to the slow storm gathering beyond the barn walls. Mark's fingers hovered over the keyboard, heart pounding. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about sending a message to Karen and the entire HOA. Boundaries are not optional. A sudden ping startled him. An alert popped up on the screen, a notification from one of the back doors. Mark clicked over to see a blurry figure moving stealthily near the barn's rear exit. He recognized the coat and gait, the shadowy person he'd glimpsed twice before. Curiosity mingled with unease. Who was sneaking around? Was there more to this party than just wild celebration? He quickly toggled the camera angle to zoom in. The figure crouched briefly, then disappeared behind a stack of old crates. Mark's mind raced. What could they be hiding? Mark muted the party sounds and focused. The barn's floor creaked faintly under the weight of the guests, but something deeper echoed beneath, a dull thud, rhythmic and unnatural. It was a sound he hadn't heard since he built the barn, back when he discovered the hidden cellar beneath the floorboards. The cellar was a secret he kept for years. Mark had never told a soul what he'd found down there, an old metal box buried deep in the earth, locked tight with a rusted padlock. Inside, relics from the land's past, things that didn't belong in the sanitized, rule-bound world Karen sought to impose. A flicker of a smile crossed Mark's lips. Maybe it was time to remind Karen that this barn held secrets she'd never dreamed of. He rose and walked over to a dusty cabinet in the corner, pulling out a small remote control. His thumb hovered over the largest red button, the one labeled EOCKDOUN in bold letters. Outside, the music roared on, carefree and loud. Inside, Karen's laughter echoed like a challenge, but Mark wasn't rushing. He was waiting for the perfect moment to turn the tide. His mind flashed back to all the times Karen had twisted HOA rules to intimidate neighbors. The petty fines, the endless emails, the way she lorded over the neighborhood like a tyrant. Tonight, it would end. Mark glanced at his phone. 11:45 p.m., almost midnight. With a slow breath, he pressed the button. Outside the barn, a low mechanical hum filled the air, barely audible over the party noise. Then, with a harsh metallic click, the heavy barn doors began sliding closed, locking automatically. Inside, the music stuttered, then died abruptly as the power flickered. Shouts of confusion rose, followed by the sharp click of locks engaging on all exits. Panic rippled through the crowd. Karen's voice rose above the chaos, commanding order, but her confident tone faltered. Phones were pulled out, but signals were weak, the barn's thick walls blocking calls. Mark watched the live feed as Karen's expression shifted, from smug queen to trapped predator. The quiet storm had arrived. Mark leaned back in his chair, heart racing but steady. This was his barn, his rules, and no one was leaving until they learned that lesson. Inside the barn, confusion erupted like wildfire. The sudden blackout turned the once lively party into a chaotic nightmare. Music stopped mid-beat, laughter died in startled gasps, and the flashing colored lights gave way to harsh emergency bulbs casting cold, flickering shadows on the walls. "Hey, what the hell's going on?" someone shouted as a wave of murmurs rose. Karen's voice cut through the panic, sharp and commanding. "Everyone stay calm. It's just a power outage. Someone's probably fiddling with the breaker. It'll be fixed soon." But her confident tone masked the knot tightening in her stomach. She rushed toward the main doors, flinging them with all her strength, only to be met with cold steel. The barn doors were locked. From the sound of the mechanical latch sliding into place, the lock was automatic and secure. "No, Mark, let us out," Karen screamed, pounding on the heavy wood. A chorus of angry shouts and pounding feet joined her. Phones appeared, glowing weakly in the darkness, but signal bars flickered and dropped. The thick barn walls were a dead zone, blocking calls for help or rescue. Karen's carefully constructed authority cracked as people's frustration turned to fear. Someone near the back door yelled, "There's no way out. The doors are locked." A murmur of dread swept through the crowd like a cold wave. Faces lit by the emergency lights showed a mixture of disbelief and growing panic. Mark sat in his living room miles away, watching it all through his cameras. A grim satisfaction settled over him as he observed the chaos he'd unleashed. The party that had hijacked his sanctuary was now a prison, and he held the keys. Back in the barn, whispers turned to frantic discussions. "Why would Mark do this?" one guest asked. "Because he's pissed," another snapped. "We didn't even ask to use the barn." Karen, struggling to maintain control, barked orders. "Everyone calm down. Let's not make this worse. We'll figure something out." But the partygoers were no longer thinking about fun. Eyes darted toward the locked exits. Hands searched frantically for tools or objects to pry the doors open. Some paced nervously. Others slumped in corners, overwhelmed by claustrophobia. Then, a chilling realization hit them. This wasn't just a prank or accident. Mark had planned this. The locks, the blackout, the signal jammer. It was all deliberate. Karen's voice shook as she confronted the crowd. This isn't how we solve problems. We need to stay united and... A loud thud interrupted her. Someone had just pulled up a loose floorboard near the barn center. Beneath it lay a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The discovery sparked a wave of curiosity and fear. Mark had told no one about the cellar beneath the barn. What secrets could it hold? Some guests argued to investigate. Others warned against it. Karen's eyes gleamed with opportunity. Maybe we find a way out down there, she suggested, forcing hope into her tone. Two brave souls, fueled by desperation, climbed down the steps. The air below was cold and damp. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing dusty crates and an old metal box, locked tight with a rusted padlock. Suddenly, a muffled sound echoed from somewhere deeper. Something was moving. The tension in the barn skyrocketed. Everyone gathered near the stairwell, hearts pounding. Was the cellar empty? Was someone hiding down there? Upstairs, the mood darkened. Whispers of old neighborhood legends surfaced, tales about buried secrets and hidden betrayals connected to the barn's land. Karen's grip on power wavered as fear replaced arrogance. Outside, Mark watched with quiet control, knowing the chaos was just beginning. He understood the fragile balance between order and anarchy in the barn, and he was ready to push it further if necessary. For Mark, this wasn't just about property. It was about respect, boundaries, and making sure Karen, and everyone else, finally learned the cost of crossing him. The two brave guests climbed cautiously down the creaking stairs into the cellar's cold, stale air. Their flashlights barely penetrated the dense darkness, illuminating dust-covered crates and a heavy metal box chained tightly in the corner. The air felt thick with silence, like something ancient was holding its breath. "Look at this," whispered Lisa, the more daring of the two, as she brushed away cobwebs from the box's rusted padlock. "I've never seen anything like this in the neighborhood." Her companion, Jason, swallowed nervously. "Should we open it? What if it's dangerous?" Before Lisa could respond, a faint metallic scraping echoed from deeper in the cellar, soft but deliberate, as if something or someone was moving. "Did you hear that?" Jason's voice trembled. Lisa nodded, flashlight trembling in her hand. "Stay close." Upstairs, the crowd pressed closer to the stairwell, the tension thickening with every passing second. Karen tried to keep control, but her voice wavered as panic threatened to take hold. "Lisa, Jason," she called down, forcing calm. "If you find anything useful, tell us. We need a way out." Below, Lisa knelt beside the metal box and struggled with the lock. It groaned and gave way after a few moments, the padlock falling free with a dull clang. Heart pounding, she lifted the heavy lid. Inside were stacks of old documents, yellowed and brittle with age. Among the papers lay an old leather-bound journal, its pages brittle but surprisingly intact. Jason flipped through the journal carefully. "This looks like some kind of diary," he said. "From the original owner of the land decades ago." Lisa's eyes widened as she skimmed the faded handwriting. "The barn holds secrets no one should know. The land itself is cursed, they say. But I know the truth lies beneath, hidden in the cellar. What I've buried here must never see the light." A chill ran through both of them. Suddenly, the metallic scraping noise grew louder, closer. The cellar seemed to close in around them, shadows stretching unnaturally on the walls. Lisa and Jason exchanged a fearful glance. Something was down there with them. Upstairs, the party was now a mixture of anxious whispers and uneasy silences. The initial outrage at being trapped had morphed into dread. "Mark's playing a game with us," muttered one guest. "This isn't about property. It's about control." Karen paced nervously, her authoritative facade cracking. She glanced toward the stairwell, worried eyes searching the cellar's darkness. What if there's more to this barn than we thought? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the cellar. A crate toppled, spilling old, dusty tools onto the floor. Lisa and Jason scrambled back toward the stairs, their flashlights darting wildly. "Something's down here with us," Lisa whispered, voice trembling. They climbed quickly, hearts hammering. As they emerged, the crowd surged forward, hungry for answers. Karen snatched the journal from Jason's hands, scanning pages with growing alarm. "Listen to this," she said, voice low and urgent. "This diary talks about a buried secret beneath the barn. Something the original owner hid to protect everyone. It says the land was once the site of a terrible feud, and that whoever disturbs the cellar risks unleashing something dangerous." The barn fell into a stunned silence. Mark watched it all unfold through the cameras, a slow, satisfied smile curling his lips. He'd known the barn's history better than anyone. The land had always been a powder keg, just waiting for the right spark. And tonight, the spark had been lit. As the crowd absorbed the revelation, the distant sound of creaking wood echoed beneath their feet. A sudden chilling breeze swept through the barn. The shadows lengthened, and something ancient stood beneath the floorboards. The barn fell into an uneasy silence, the weight of the diary's ominous warning settling heavily on everyone inside. Karen's voice was almost a whisper as she held the fragile journal aloft. "We've disturbed something here. We should leave, now." But no one moved. Fear had frozen the crowd, a cold knot tightening in their stomachs. Suddenly, the floorboards beneath them groaned, a deep, resonant creak that rippled through the barn's wooden frame. The guests exchanged startled glances as the ground seemed to shift beneath their feet. Karen's bravado crumbled. "This isn't just a story. Something's happening." Mark, watching from miles away, felt a surge of satisfaction. The chaos was beyond his control now, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Inside the cellar, Lisa and Jason had returned, drawn by the growing unease upstairs. Their flashlights flickered as they moved cautiously among the dusty crates. The air felt thicker here, charged with something unseen. Jason's hand brushed against a loose floorboard. It shifted slightly under his touch, revealing a narrow crack beneath. He knelt to peer inside, heart pounding. "Lisa, look at this," he murmured. Lisa shone her light into the narrow gap. Inside lay a small ornate box, covered in strange symbols and tarnished with age. As Jason reached out to lift it, a cold wind whipped through the cellar, extinguishing their flashlights in an instant. Darkness swallowed them whole. A low, eerie whisper rose around them, indistinct but chilling. The sound seemed to come from the very walls, a ghostly murmur that sent shivers racing up their spines. Upstairs, the panic was growing. The locked doors felt less like security and more like a cage. Guests clustered in groups, eyes darting toward every shadow, ears straining for any strange sound. Karen's voice was sharp now, desperate. "We need to stay together. No one goes back down there." But curiosity gnawed at some. A few younger guests whispered about exploring further, eager to uncover the barn's secrets before it was too late. Suddenly, a heavy thud echoed from the barn's loft, a place few dared to venture. The sound was followed by a faint scratching, as if something, or someone, was moving among the rafters. The crowd froze, tension skyrocketing. Mark's fingers hovered over his laptop keyboard. The barn was no longer just a battleground. It was a stage for something far darker. He glanced back at the cameras. One flickered oddly, then went dead. A cold dread crept over him. The shadows were moving. The mysterious figure Mark had spotted earlier, who had slipped through the crowd, was no longer just a shadow. Now it was something tangible, lurking in the barn's darkest corners. Karen swallowed hard. "We shouldn't have come here tonight," she muttered. From somewhere deep within the cellar, a faint, rhythmic tapping began, a slow, deliberate beat that echoed like a heartbeat. Lisa and Jason, their flashlights back on, exchanged nervous glances. They could feel eyes watching them from the darkness. Jason swallowed hard. This place, it's alive. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping against the barn's tin roof like a slow drumbeat. The storm was coming. Inside, the barn was no longer just a barn. It was a trap, a cage, and something ancient and restless was waking. Mark leaned forward, voice barely audible. "Let's see how far they'll go before the truth breaks them." The rain outside intensified, hammering against the barn's weathered roof like an ominous drumbeat. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with dread and confusion. The guests clustered together, eyes wide with terror as the bond's creaks and groans seemed to echo the whispered warnings from the old diary. Karen paced nervously, her confident veneer now shattered. "We need to find a way out," she insisted, voice cracking. "If we stay here, something worse than a locked door will get us." Lisa and Jason, clutching the mysterious ornate box they'd recovered from the cellar, approached Karen. "This might be the key," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "The diary mentioned something about an old curse, and this box has strange symbols on it. Maybe it holds the answers." Karen hesitated, then nodded. "Open it, carefully." Jason's hands trembled as he unlatched the box. Inside lay a small collection of artifacts, an ancient key, faded photographs, and a brittle parchment covered in cryptic writing. The crowd leaned in, trying to make sense of the strange relics. Suddenly, the barn shook violently, dust falling from the rafters. A low, guttural growl echoed through the space, causing several guests to gasp and step back. "Did you feel that?" whispered one. The lights flickered, then went out again, plunging the barn into total darkness. Screams echoed as the crowd panicked, bumping into one another in the pitch black. In the dim emergency lighting, Karen tried to regain control. "Everyone stay calm. We'll figure this out." Mark, watching remotely, leaned closer to the screen. The barn was unraveling exactly as he predicted. Suddenly, a loud crack came from the cellar stairs. Someone was descending, slowly, cautiously. The crowd turned toward the staircase, breath held. Lisa and Jason appeared, faces pale but determined. "We need to talk," Lisa said urgently. "There's more to this barn than just property lines. This land has a dark history, a feud, a betrayal, and a curse. The original owner sealed something away down there, and I think it's waking up." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Waking up? What does that mean?" Lisa pointed to the parchment, tracing the faded symbols. "This warns of a spirit bound to the land, angry and vengeful. The curse protects the barn from outsiders, locking them in until they atone." The barn fell silent again, the weight of those words sinking in. Suddenly, from the loft above, a shadow flickered. Something swift and unseen. A cold wind swept through the barn, chilling everyone to the bone. Karen's voice dropped to a whisper, "We're not alone." Then the barn's heavy wooden doors creaked, one slowly inching open as if pushed by an unseen hand. Gasps echoed. The crowd surged toward the opening, only to be stopped by a sharp metallic clang. The door slammed shut again. Trapped. The ancient key from the box glinted in the emergency light. Lisa held it up. "Maybe this is how we end it." Mark's lips curled into a satisfied smile. The final act was beginning. The barn was suffocating now, thick with fear and desperation. The guests huddled around Lisa as she clutched the ancient key, her hands shaking but resolute. "We have to unlock whatever's trapped down there," she said firmly. "It's the only way to break the curse and get out." Karen nodded reluctantly, her usual arrogance replaced by genuine fear. "Lead the way." With flashlights cutting through the darkness, the group descended into the cellar once more. The air was colder here, heavy with the weight of decades-old secrets. At the bottom of the stairs, Lisa approached an iron door, its surface scarred with strange symbols matching those on the box. She inserted the key into the lock. It clicked open with a sound that echoed like a death knell. Behind the door lay a small chamber. Inside, a stone pedestal held a weathered leather-bound book, its pages filled with strange runes and diagrams. As Lisa reached for the book, a sudden chilling presence filled the room. A cold wind whipped through the cellar, and shadows twisted into eerie shakes on the walls. The guests gasped as a low, spectral voice whispered through the chamber, "You have disturbed what was buried. Now face the consequence." Karen stepped forward, trembling. "What do you want?" The voice echoed, "Redemption, truth, release." Lisa flipped through the book, her eyes widening. "This is a record of the feud, the betrayal between neighbors that cursed this land. It says only an act of true honesty and restitution can break the cycle." Suddenly, the barn trembled violently, dust and debris falling from above. Panic surged again. "Mark, watching from his laptop, felt a cold knot in his stomach. He hadn't expected the curse to be real or to awaken with such force. Suddenly, a new camera angle flickered on his screen, one showing the barn's front porch, and standing there, illuminated by the storm's lightning, was a figure Mark hadn't seen before. A woman. Her eyes locked on the barn, her expression unreadable. The screen glitched, and the feed cut out. Mark's heart skipped. Outside, the rain pounded harder. Inside, the guests stood frozen. Then, in a voice calm but commanding, the woman spoke from the shadows. The curse binds us all, not just the land, but the lies we tell ourselves. Karen's jaw clenched. Who are you? The woman stepped forward into the flickering light. I am the last of the original owner's family. I've come to end this. A collective breath was held. The barn's heavy doors groaned and slowly began to unlock, swinging open to the stormy night beyond. Lisa looked at the woman, then at the book. What must we do? The woman's eyes softened. Face your truths. Confess your wrongs. Only then will the curse lift. One by one, the trapped guests began to speak, admitting grudges, lies, and secrets buried deep. Karen, the last, took a deep breath. I've ruled with fear. I thought control was respect. The woman nodded. Then you are ready. As the final words left Karen's lips, the barn seemed to exhale, a weight lifted from its beams. Outside, the storm calmed. The guests stepped out, blinking in the fresh air. The barn doors closed gently behind them, no longer a prison but a place of reckoning. Mark sat back, stunned. His battle for respect had uncovered something far greater. And as he shut his laptop, a quiet whisper echoed in his mind. Respect isn't taken by force. It's earned through truth.